Let me pull down my curtain. Or not. As I drop some terrible, awful news. Poor old Sotek isn't well. So, what are we to do? Here I am live. This was supposed to be our episode of Lore Beards, but unfortunately, he is not feeling at all well. And by he, I mean Sotek, meaning that this, I suppose, is somewhat of an impromptu Ask Andy Anything stream. I was all prepared for discussing... I don't even need my headphones on because I'm by myself today. I was all prepared for discussing Morathi Part 2. I'm particularly looking forward to this one, so the fact that I'm not doing it right now is a little bitty sad, but it's much more sad that poor old Sotek isn't feeling well. So before I say anything, can we double check that I can be heard? Because there were some severe sound issues with me yesterday, and I would like to make sure that I can be heard before we dive in. So if someone could drop in the comments that I am coming through loud and clear, that would be lovely. And I'm not going to continue on until I'm definitely certain. So apparently Vault Boy says we can be heard, and Hawk says it's nice and clear on both sides. So, I have a few things to say before we dive in. Number one, Sotek is clearly not well because he's not here. I'm by myself. There is no Lorebeards episode today. Hence, it says LAWhammer up in the corner just to make sure that nobody gets the wrong idea. And if you happen to be in the comments as we're going and somebody goes, where the fuck is Sotek? Do please tell them where he's gone because sadly, he's not here. So what are we going to do? I am going to quickly jump in with a bunch of Ask Me Anything questions. So if you do have anything that you would like to ask, drop in it. I'm also going to do something that I've been sort of half threatening, half discussing with a bunch of people. I'm possibly going to discuss cults and what they are, because there's been a lot of discussion about exactly what cults are or are not, but we'll see where all the various chat and questions go first before I consider whether I'm going to do that. But yeah, let's just see where it goes. I'm live, I'm here, we're chatting, we're chilling. I'm going to scroll back into my comments and see what we've got. Let's start off with Brock. After first stream, here's some other Morathi-ish characters I thought of. Sarah Connor, Terminator, yeah, fair. Queen Marika, Elden Ring, and Queen Ashera from World of Warcraft, which I don't know, because I never played World of Warcraft. I know that sounds like a crime, but never played it. I mean, I had it installed, but I just never got round to it. I didn't want the time sink. I had played far too many massive online games by this point to want to play another one. Brock says, personal Dark Elf anthem, The Corrosion by the Sisters of Mercy. Oh, this Corrosion. I love that song. Indeed, I haven't listened to it for a good year or so, so I'm going to put it on after this stream. Proper angsty. Yes, it is. Trying to come up with a good story for the lyrics. Yeah, I think it's a great tune. Brock comes in again. Thanks very much, Brock, by the way. After hearing the first stream, Morathi must have insane levels of conviction in her own vision to go against even the gods and have zero doubts. Yeah, I think this is a fair comment concerning Morathi. She has a unique character, but it's a character that I don't think is necessarily understood by many who have written about her, because different writers have added different aspects to her character, and when you take them all, you're just left with a, oh wow, Morathi is something impressive. But each individual written part doesn't necessarily add up to that, meaning that the Morathi we often get comes across as bizarrely weird in some of the iterations of her in some of the books. But yeah, we'll leave that to the Morathi stream, which we'll be diving into now next week. So if you're coming in going, where the heck is Sotek? Sadly, Sotek is ill, so I'm doing a quick Ask Me Anything, which will go for as long as it goes for, because I'm here, so why not? Let's do it. And our Morathi stream will be next week, so that's next Sunday at 4 p.m. UK time, and it'll be on the LAWhammer channel, so these same channels. So, yeah. A little bit disappointed, but at the same point, mostly because Sotek's not feeling well, so that's always a reason to be sad. Brocklet says, would Morathi's visions be a huge hindrance for the Old One's plan, or rather be a part of them, assuming they wanted the cataclysm and the end of the world? So we have different ways that we can interpret this. The Old Ones are a controversial group for many of the fans of Warhammer, because the Old Ones, as they were originally pitched, were just a precursor race that were sort of sci-fi. And as they developed through the course of various editions of the game, they took on more and more godlike powers, more and more capabilities. So instead of just being a precursor civilization that appeared like gods, because they had such high levels of technology and were creatures that were almost at one with the aether in a way that most species in the Warhammer world simply aren't, they became bigger and bigger and bigger and more impressive, to the point that when it comes to what they eventually become in the old world, it becomes quite clear, if you read the old world material, that the Old Ones planned the cataclysm. And that is definitely a reading that's quite controversial to many of the various readers and fans of Warhammer back from the past. So would they be a hindrance for that? It depends entirely on whether you think Morathi is part of the Old One's plan or not. I mean, ultimately, she becomes a core component of Age of Sigmar, so it would seem that if that is their plan, then Morathi is not a huge hindrance at all. She's just one step in the great cosmic plan that is the Old One's goal. Indeed, I would suggest that she is probably a core component of what they plan, and is possibly, as we discussed in the last stream last week, possibly the source of Morathi's core visions. That, however, is an interpretation and most certainly is not indicated by the text. Moving down, Maglaroth says, if Morathi was forced to choose between Malekith or Inarian, which one would she save and which would die, or is it a no-brainer? Actually, kind of, yeah. It is a no-brainer. This is one of those ones where she would go with Inarian, almost certainly every single time. And I think that might come as a surprise given just how tender she is with Malekith, and just how many times Malekith has been near death or in a position where he would have died, except for his mother. And whilst, yes, he has often got very annoyed with her and sometimes even just left her to her own devices to try and fend off against terrible attacks, and we'll be discussing some of that next week, because obviously for those of you who are turning up a little bit later, Sotek is not with us this week because he is ill, meaning that we're not doing the Morathi stream and I'm just warbling away for a little bit of time since I'm here already. So we'll be discussing some of the things that happen between Morathi and her son, and I think it's very fair to say that he is of exceeding importance to her, but she's in love and she is cruel in a fashion that most of us don't quite grasp. For us, we would be left with, well, this is a deeply conflicted moral situation. I think it is for her almost a no-brainer. She is genuinely in love with Inarian, for good or ill. And if there was a choice there, she can always make another Malekith. You can't make, with any ease at least, another Inarian. Although we will also be discussing that next week, because she certainly gives it a go. So yes, in this case, it's almost certainly Inarian, but that could be written differently. And I can think of at least one writer who might consider writing it differently. Maglaroth, also, and did Andy see the cheeky, yes, I did see the cheeky Creative Assembly Dreadmaw model, and it made me smile. I mean, how can you not? Hannibal. So yes, last week I missed Andy learning what serving cunt is, and a little bit disappointed I didn't know that. It's the sort of thing that me, someone who is a frequent user of said word, I swear a lot, particularly off stream. I swear quite a lot on stream, but I swear much more in real life than I do on stream. And the fact that I didn't know that made me laugh more than you probably need to know. So yes, just to make sure that you all are aware, Sotek is not coming this week because sadly he is ill, which means our Morathi stream is postponed for 1 week, and we'll be picking up with Morathi Part 2 next Sunday at 4 p.m. UK time, and it's going to be a good... Hawk! Yeah, ticker tape message about Sotek illness. You know what? That's a good idea. Why don't I do that so I don't need to keep on saying it? Hawk, you're a genius. It's almost like, you know, You're just a super cool guy. So let me just quickly tap out a message. What we say? Sadly, Nurgle has captured Sotek in his garden, meaning that he cannot join us today. So the Morathi part 2 stream is rescheduled to next Sunday. That sounds good. So why not have a chat with me, Andy. I talk about myself in the third person. It always feels a bit weird. Let's talk about myself in the third person. Why not? So I have a chat with Andy. Well, he answers questions. Oh, so I'm already too long. Oh, okay. I've got maximum. Why not have a chat with Andy? I'm just going to stop there. There we go. Let's make sure I didn't make any spelling mistakes. Sadly, Nurgle's captured Sotek in his garden. Let's put a capital on the G of garden because that's one heck of a garden. Meaning he cannot join us today. As a result, the Morathi Part 2 stream is rescheduled for next Sunday. So why not? How many words have I got? Oh, I've only got 12 characters left. So why not? Add banner. Edit it and scroll that bad boy across the bottom. And bring it up and see what happens. There we go. Right, let's get back to the comments and where we were. Thanks, Hawk. That was a great idea. I have now done that. So I no longer need to keep on saying, oh, Sotek's not with us. No Morathi Part 2. Because apparently text is along the bottom. I will forget about it because that's largely what I do. Hey, Battlefoot pops in. Did the fishmen poison Loremaster of Sotek? Is there an Age of Sigmar army you particularly want to learn more about? What is the virtuous economic cycle? You always pull out a question that I don't actually know. The virtuous economic cycle. I mean, I could make something up. But if there's an Age of Sigmar army I'm particularly interested to learn more about, that's an interesting question in of itself. I haven't read a lot of what has become of the elves. I've read a bit about the Lumineth. I read a bit about the Deepkin. But I haven't read that much about what happened, interestingly enough, with Morathi and the Kane lot. So that's one that I wouldn't mind knowing about, particularly given what the subject of, well, the subject that we were supposed to be covering today, Morathi. But yeah. Yeah, I think I would like to have that one. Just a quick hello. Hey, hello, Simpbox. Nice to see you there. Vault Boy 1300. Thank you very much. Classic Morathi move, Sotek pull, tease, and then edge us viewers for more Morathi content later. Yeah. Classic move. LAWhammer, how do you pronounce Ashland correctly? There is no correct because it's a fantasy name. But if we are correcting it, if we are saying it the way that it would be said as the name exists in the real world, it's Ashland. And given that it's a classic lift of Irish stuff for elves, it almost certainly is Ashland. So yes, Ashland, although Iceland, I mean, you can do whatever you want, it's your world, but I would prefer to pronounce it the way the name is actually pronounced. Tech27SS, which Warhammer Fantasy character would you like to get involved with? Hi. Let's get involved. That is an interesting question. So let's start off with the obvious one, since it was supposed to be the topic of the day. Morathi is a fucking excellent character that I don't think has been well understood or utilized by many, not all, of the Warhammer writers. But I wouldn't go near her with a 10-foot long barge pole. I have a very deep understanding of what she's like in my games. And she is morally very different to humans and most elves, and I would not survive that. However, given what I know of the Warhammer world, if I was in the Warhammer world, she would probably seek me out. Because she is a seer and would know that I was there, and that means I would have an interesting time ahead of me. So, would I like to be involved with her? No. But would it happen? Probably, because you know too much about the Warhammer world, Andy. And she's exactly the sort who gets what she wants when she wants it. Of all the characters in the Warhammer world that I would like to get to know, Emmanuel Leibowitz of Nuln is one of the most misunderstood characters in Warhammer, and I love her dearly as a character. I have played her in various forms for almost 30 years, and I kind of adore her. I think she's just the best ever. So she's high on the list, and Lindsay won't mind too much about that one. Lindsay's been in more relationships with Emmanuel through various characters than many. So, yeah, that's fine. Let's move down. Emmanuel rocks. Skithane! Talk about the differences in exalted designations for demons. Exalted demons being possessed people, but exalted demons also as a... Oh, God. So the reason that I shook my head with an "oh God" as I sit here too low above the comment is that different writers have used different terms for different things, and oh, it's annoying. What you've offered here, talk about the differences in exalted designations for demons. Exalted demons being possessed people. Yep, that's been used. But exalted demons also a rank, as in the biggest, most important, big demons. It's a handy term that's used in the tabletop to differentiate those that are the bigger, better versions of the other demons. In truth, exalted demon is not really a term in the game world in the same fashion that it was in the tabletop world. Because in the tabletop world, it's a required designation. In the same way that every champion equivalent needs to have its own special name to mark it out clearly for people who are choosing what to put into their armies. Where the demonic hierarchies and their ranks are much more complicated and not so simple and copy-paste applied to every single chaos god. Strangely enough, chaos is somewhat chaotic, and not all of the chaos gods use these terms equally. I would instead say, rather than talking about the differences between the different designations of exalted, I would instead say that exalted as an adjective is used for much more than just what you suggest in a variety of different forms by each of the chaos cults and chaos gods and their various subordinates in different ways. And when it comes to their manifestations in world, you'll find that it will be very inconsistently applied in reality. So that's a bit of a back to front way of viewing it, which hopefully should be fun. So again, apologies for Sotek not being with us because he is sadly ill. As I move over to Sir Panza. Do you hate guilt as much as the dentist? No, dentist loves my teeth because they're getting freaking rich off me. As a small aside on that one, so if you didn't know, I've had a lot of dental woes recently. I apparently, as I reach my 50th birthday, holy crap, my body has just decided that it doesn't want teeth anymore and has gone into a complete wind down. And my mouth went from everything's fine to everything's not fine. But on the slightly good news, everything is fixed bar one tooth now. And that one tooth has just had its bill reduced from around about $5,000, because that tooth's coming out now, all the way down to $4,000. So it's actually dropped a little bit, but it might go back up again if I require a bone graft. And yes, I did indeed say the words bone graft. Sadly, I didn't get the extraction yet because I got an infection. One of the great joys of being diabetic is I'm much more likely to get an infection. So yeah, I had an abscess, and that's one of the reasons why I'd been missing for a couple of the shows, because was fucking painful. Diabetic horrors are not fun. But fortunately, that's now pretty much fixed. So I'm due my extraction next Friday. So if you're a LAWhammer watcher, we won't be LAWhammering next Friday because I now have an extraction lined up on that day. I'll be making a post about that on the Monday when I do all of the videos that we're posting up there. So yeah, it means I might also be missing Tabletop Scotland, which upsets me a little. If you don't know what Tabletop Scotland is, it's the biggest gaming convention in Scotland, and pretty much everybody goes that I know, and it's awesome. We've had the runner of Tabletop Scotland, David, over on Inside the Rookery more than once. He's a lovely guy. Love him dearly. And sadly, it looks like I'm probably not going, but if the extraction goes really well and it all heals up nicely and the next day I don't feel bad, I am so going to that because it's going to be ace. Okay, gentlemen, you've said often that the idea of elven gods, human gods, etc., in your view, that the idea of elven gods are human gods. Is that what you're saying? However, while there are some gods that seem to be the same ones that the elves worship, yes, and again, the words worship are often misused. Some of them don't seem to have an equivalent. Do you think they are actually valid gods as well? If they are, that implies even the gods the humans worship could be separate entities as well. Absolutely. To remove the comment here, let's make a few things clear. The elves have a pantheon, and this pantheon is represented most typically and commonly in modern Warhammer with a mandala that puts all of the gods that they recognize into a pantheon. Different elves put different stresses on different gods and view different gods as important, whether they are Kadai, that's the heavenly hosts, they are the ones that follow Azurin's plan, or whether the Kaithari, they are the ones that are the underworld gods, those that went, screw everything, we're going to do it our own way. And they are not elven gods, they're gods. Let's make that quite clear. They're not elven gods, they're gods. Because those gods are worshipped, have followers all over the Warhammer world. And those gods manifest in many different ways. But they are not all of the gods that the Warhammer world has to offer. There are not just 10, 20, 100, or even 1,000. There is quite literally an uncounted number of etheric entities that have the equivalent power or are recognized by mortals as gods. So whilst, yes, many of the elven gods have their equivalent in many of the human pantheons that you'll find out there, human pantheons include lots of other entities as well, often local deities that might just represent, I don't know, a river, or Grandfather Reich, for example, very famously in the Empire, is a god of the Reich. You've got Delb, who is a great, almost chthonic, not chthonic, get the right, it kind of is actually, deity that sits on in the depths of Lake Delb, not too far away from Delberts. So yeah, there's loads and loads of different gods. And yeah, what else do I need to say other than the pantheons are different in different parts of the world? The elves recognize a core set of what they consider to be the core gods. Other groups of people have different sets of gods. It's also worth noting that the End Times did some really crazy things with the elven gods, and that various writers have disparately discussed the elven gods as waning and losing their power until eventually Ranadandra comes and they can probably return, but the End Times did not do much with that. Other writers have basically said, nah, they all kind of died. They have ported 40k concepts over and very much run with those, where others have said, no, they're completely fine. Everything's cool. There's nothing for you to worry about. So yeah, different writers have taken different angles on this, so it makes it very hard to come up with a single answer. But what we can say for certain is that there is an elven pantheon and that there's lots of other pantheons around the world, and many of the gods that are deemed to be elven gods are included in those pantheons. What else can we say? Hopefully that's enough for you. Magladroth, maybe you can talk about polytheistic versus monotheistic aspects of Warhammer Fantasy that you were thinking of using a stream to discuss. Yeah, Magladroth, I have been thinking about this, and indeed I mentioned that a little bit earlier. There has been quite a lot of discussion, particularly over in the LAWhammer Discord, about monotheism in a polytheistic society, and how does that make sense? Now, for those of you who are not quite sure what these terms mean, monotheism is the idea that a single god is the only god that's important to a group of people or a culture or something similar. Polytheism is obviously lots of gods. So we recognize lots of gods. They are all important or worthy of fearing or whatever it is that the individual cultures believe. And the empire is sometimes pitched almost like it's monotheistic. And there's lots of reasons for this. And I discussed this in my previous Ask Me Anything, where we were talking about how for a while Sigmar almost was the only god that the Empire recognized. And while it was never strictly speaking the case, because there was always mentions of the other gods, particularly gods like Mor or Myrmidia or Ulrich, squirreling away in the background or mentioning a white dwarf here or there. If you just looked at the core army lists that are getting produced from Warhammer 4th edition up to about 6th, you'd never know that these existed. There was so little beyond the occasional mention of Knights of the Blazing Sun and Myrmidia or some equivalent. And it was all getting kind of dialed back, and it was all Sigmar coming forward. And a lot of the writers, particularly the Black Library writers, just kind of went with that. And it became more and more monotheistic in terms of its general character over time. And that's a part of what Warhammer sort of became, and then developed into something else later when they dialed back to polytheism as Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition came out and went, no, it's deeply polytheistic. That was developed even further by books like the Tome of Salvation. I'm going to do a stream on this. I'm not going to do it here because I actually want to do this properly, and I want to give it a proper discussion. It's not going to be a long one. This is a stream that will probably last about half an hour to an hour. So it's not the topic of a Lorebeard stream. It's not the topic of a Lorebeard's Wednesday. It's just more of a, this is sort of what it is, and how polytheism in the Empire is not like real world polytheism, because it's a fantasy version that has lots of different flavors and takes, and is a lot more war behind it, because strangely enough, this is Warhammer, and there is a great deal of conflict in their polytheism which doesn't exist in most real world polytheistic established religions and groups. So yeah, there's a really fun conversation to have there. I'm going to be drawing relatively heavily from a lot of the work that was done for Tome of Salvation, and to a degree some of the later Signs of Faith books and similar that have come in later editions. But the Tome of Salvation takes some time to discuss what cults are, where they came from, and what was there before, and what potentially could be there after. And I think that that would be worth diving into with some time. So I'm going to set up a stream for that. Watch out for it. I'll be putting news up for it probably in the next few days. I'm considering doing it before I get my extraction on Friday. Because after Friday, I might not be in a good place to do any streaming if I'm unlucky. And if I get an infection after that, which is because I'm diabetic, relatively high, and apparently because I'm old, really high. Let's be honest, Nurgle owns my soul. I'll probably get like 12 infections. It's going to be the worst. So that being the case, it might be worth getting the stream in beforehand. So watch out over on Discord and over on the LAWhammer Patreon. I will post it. And if you're not following us over on the LAWhammer Patreon, worth doing. It doesn't cost you any money. You don't need to go to Patreon and give us money. You can just literally follow all the stuff that we do over there. And I will drop a post over there giving the date so that you can all be aware of it beforehand. I'll talk to Lindsay first, though, just in case she has something that she'd like to do. So I am going to do it, but I think I'd like to give it the time that it requires and not have it interrupted with super chats. Well, it'll be interrupted with super chats. That's just how it works. But I'm going to do the whole thing before I discuss any super chats. But this is today much more of a let's just chat amongst ourselves, since we're all here and sadly Sotek is not, pardon me. Professor Japp says he liked that Adneth Deep King personally. Yeah, I really like the look of them. I was down in Workshop in Lenton not long after they were released, and it was the first set of miniatures that upon seeing them I went, okay, maybe I need to be looking more into Age of Sigmar than I was previously. Now, I remember a conversation I'd had quite some time before this. It was during the release of Age of Sigmar First Edition. So this is quite a long time ago now. Gosh, we're talking, oh, I can't remember what year it came out. And there was a great deal, a massive well of negativity towards it because all of the Warhammer fans had just seen their world blow up. And what it was replaced with was not what they wanted. The world was very different. It was patently and clearly less developed. Some of the ideas had yet to properly form that would come in later editions of Age of Sigmar, and it was quite empty by comparison. And the clear drive behind many of the choices was the attempt to control their IP, their intellectual property, more closely, changing the names of everything so that nobody could ever have a Games Workshop miniature equivalent because they're now augurs or elves or whatever equivalent that they went for each one of the different species. I mean, it doesn't matter because that's not going to stop people selling elves and dwarves and claiming that you can use them in any other game anyway. It was almost a pointless endeavor, but nevertheless, that's the direction they chose. And a lot of people were just whining and bitching. And I had a conversation with Gav Thorpe, which can be summed up as Gav saying, yeah, you know, it might not be what everybody wanted, but dive in. And he was directly saying that I should just dive in and just write stuff because it's going to be their next moneymaker, whether everybody liked it or not. So just like it. And I was like, yeah, nah, can't be bothered. And he was like, well, I'm doing it. And I was like, off you go, have fun. I'm not. And I'll admit several times afterwards, I was a little bit, I wish I had, but I still, to this day, haven't. So, yeah, there you go. Alfonso Blancas. Hi, Andy. Hello. Who would you pick in a 1v1 K-Knight Assassin or a Eshin Deathmaster? In most circumstances, the K-Knight Assassin is going to win. The K-Knight, I don't know if you've looked at them stat and stat, but they are better. The Dark Elf Assassins are kick-ass, and as are the Skaven ones, but they're a bit more, they're a bit more, you know, Skaven. It's almost like saying base level Skaven versus base level Elf. I mean, normally base level Elf has the advantage. They're faster, they move more quickly, and they have a far higher weapon skill. And the same applies pretty much across the line. That said, though, that's not how most fights actually develop in the real world. In the real Warhammer world, where it's far more likely to be an assassination attempt, which means that they're not going to be going toe-to-toe with them, regardless of what they might suggest in the various Black Library novels. Most assassination attempts don't involve any fighting at all. Like, none. Assassins have failed if they are fighting. It's one of the great lies of the assassin character, particularly the Dark Elf Assassin. They don't need to do all the training that they do to be so physically perfect, because when you're assassinating someone, the whole point of it is you get the jump on them and they can't do anything to stop you, and you kill them, often by poison or some equivalent. It's not one of those ones where they're literally jumping in front of them and going, I am the assassin here to kill you, and honorably I shall take you down. Dark Elves, not known for their honor, and Skaven, really not known for their honor. I think that they are statted for the battle game, the war game, and in reality the vast majority of them would be much less capable than a lot of people might suggest or be surprised by as assassins. But the K-Knight ones, maybe not. But yeah, I would suggest probably the elf in general when it's one-on-one in these sort of situations. But individuals like Deathmaster Schneck, for example, are really not going to be, well, easy to take down. Tyrant 25. Hi, thanks very much. Are ogres the best diplomats in the setting? The Gultus ally with Cathay, Shrewdfalg with Skaven, Iron Skins with Chaos Dwarves, Guth Spawn Chomper with the Warriors of Chaos, and they regularly work with Greenskins. The answer to this is yes. And this might come as a surprise to many, because everyone thinks of ogres as these big, bellowing, near mindless creatures. And they forget one of the core concepts of what ogres are. And that's that they blend in with almost anyone. They are the great, they're not exactly charismatic creatures, but they are the great bridge between almost all cultures in Warhammer. The ogres will work with and fight with anyone. As long as they get paid and they can eat, they are broadly speaking happy. And they're more than powerful enough that most people prefer to have them on side than not. So if you've got a choice, no matter what faction you may be, to deal with the ogres or fight with the ogres, most people are going to say, yeah, I'm going to be dealing with them if I possibly can. Their physicality, their sheer size, their sheer strength is enough of a threat that most species prefer to deal with them than fight them. Indeed, they're terrifying to an extreme degree, and that is enough that most people will be brought to the table. And yeah, that means that they are, perhaps surprisingly, exceedingly good diplomats. They're terrible diplomats. Now, let's be truthful. They're not good diplomats. They don't come up with clever diplomatic strategies. That's not what they are. But what they are is exceedingly good social chameleons. They can fit in with anyone. And this is something that their man killers, for example, a bit of a misnomer given what they actually do. But this is something that ogres do. Whenever they arrive in another culture, they take on their cultural trappings. Ogres in the Empire tend to dress like Empire folk. Ogres in Cathay do the same. They dress like Cathayan folk. Ogres over in Nepal look like the Benis down in End, like they're Indish, or alternatively from Araby, they're Arabian. Look at them with their big, huge Arabian clothes. Ogres fit in with everyone, and that is also a surprising benefit towards them generally just not just fitting in, but getting on with others. But they're also terrifying, and that should always be remembered. And it's one of the reasons why they are so successful. Cole Patterson. What Warhammer characters would you play Dark Deeds with? Oh. If you haven't bought Dark Deeds, you can do so now if you're on YouTube. The links are in the video's description. You can go buy your own copy right now of a game I did help put together with my bestest pals, Andy Chambers and Mark Gibbons. And good times were had by all indeed. It's a great game with gorgeous art. I should actually go get the big poster for it because it looks awesome. We've got a huge, massive roller poster that we commissioned for, strangely enough, for Tabletop Scotland. I say commissioned. Mark just drew a picture for it and went, here you go. That'll be awesome. And I was like, yeah, it's fucking awesome. So that's a new piece of Mark Gibbons artwork. And if you don't know who Mark Gibbons is, just do a web search for Mark Gibbons art and you will find one of the best Warhammer and 40k artists in the freaking world. And yeah, his art is end to end inside Dark Deeds. Do recommend it. So which Warhammer characters would you play Dark Deeds with? I mean, I play with anyone. I'm a gamer at heart. I like playing games. Would I trust the vast majority of the Warhammer characters out there? No, because most of them are horrendous. Warhammer is not a nice world. But if we're dealing with the supposed Order factions or any equivalent, most of them would be well worth playing a good game with. And I think most of them would quite enjoy it too. It is a game of backstabbing malicious minions. We have used it in LAWhammer, actually, where it's a game inside the Warhammer world in our version. One of our NPCs brought the game, equivalent Dark Deeds, to the players and they played it out. But it wasn't just that we played the game in time, which we did do. We actually played a game of Dark Deeds. You can watch that in one of our previous episodes of LAWhammer. But we actually used the results of that game to determine what happened with various factions in the upcoming war that was about to occur. Each one of the players was effectively playing one of those factions, and if they won, the faction in the upcoming war that was about to occur would have an advantage. So it's not just that you can use the game and have a bit of a laugh with it or have it inside the Warhammer world like we did, but you can actually use gaming results to give you different outcomes for your roleplay situations. I strongly believe in the concept of using mini games inside my roleplay games, i.e. small internal games that influence the wider role-playing game that I'm playing. And yeah, I think it's great. You should get yourself a copy. Yeah, sounds good. Elemental exposure. If elves are long-lived, yes. Powerful, yes. Wise, but also highly emotional, yes. Political, yes. Then how is their civ still around? Couldn't one powerful elf having a bad day accidentally level a city block? Yes. Yeah. So elemental exposure is highlighting one of the weird details of the elves. And that's that each writer has genuinely, and sometimes publicly said as well, that there is as many elves as they require for their stories. That's a fair piece of storytelling. I mean, that's loosely how it works anyway. But that means that often the elves they create and the things that they can do, and then you apply it to their world. If you apply it the way that many of the stories suggest it should be applied, what you are saying there is 100, I've got the wrong comment there, is 100% a fact. Yes, one powerful elf having a bad day can accidentally level a city block. They don't, however. So you need to come up with a reason for why it's the case. Now, in my game, there is a reason for that. In LAWhammer, we've got effectively an entire set of rules for elves called their paths, and it deeply restricts what they can and can't do. It's deeply personal and deeply dangerous if they should break any of the strictures for their paths. Their literal souls are in jeopardy. And that is how we've manifested the control in many respects of the excesses of what elves offer, because they are excessive. If you've got yourself an 800-year-old elf who happens to go off in one, it's going to be tough. But it is also worth noting that the elves are long-lived, powerful, wise, hopefully, emotional and political. But there's also just as many others out there who are all of those things as them. So even when one powerful elf goes, there's lots of other powerful elves that presumably would step in. But again, a good reason is always a good idea. And particularly on the Dark Elf side, they often don't have a good reason. I'm just going to bring up this comment since I brought it up already from Professor Shap. This might be something for the next stream when Sotek's around, but I would be curious to know what you would have wanted to have been Morathi's endgame for Warhammer Fantasy. I like how she has ascended in Sigmar, but it made me think about how it could have been for fantasy. Yeah, the end time story for Morathi, which I'm not going to dive into with any depth here because we'll probably cover it when we do the Morathi stream next Sunday, 4 p.m. UK time on LAWhammer channels. The end time story is not great. It's not great. It doesn't make good use of her. It doesn't make good use of the character that they build. In fact, I would argue that it gives a bit of a character assassination in many respects. And it wasn't the best outcome for her. Now, that doesn't mean all of the individual story beats can't be seen through a different light and justified in a new way and turned into something really cool. I think the story of Morathi in the End Times could be freaking cool. You don't necessarily need to change stories to make them cool. You just need to change a lot of the language around it. And then suddenly the things that look weird and odd with a different set of justifications suddenly become amazing. Her end story, I kind of don't want to spoil next week's stream. That's a difficult question there, Professor Shap. I'm not going to spoil next week's stream, so I'm just simply going to say that I would have done things quite differently, and what I'll do differently will be discussed next Sunday, 4 p.m. UK, as we near the end of the Morathi stream. Okay, scrolling down there, Matthew Apper, I am almost certainly pronouncing it wrong twice. Thank you very much, appreciated. I'm getting ready to run the Enemy Within soon. Oh, excellent. Do you have any tips for GMs if the PC skills have gaps that will make progression of the story difficult? No PCs have been made yet, but anything can happen with the character generation tables. Yes, you're right, they can. I have quite a number of suggestions, in fact. So let's dive through the most obvious ones first. I don't know if you've watched LAWhammer, and if you haven't watched LAWhammer, clearly you are a criminal who needs to be hunted down by the police. I don't know why I went with police and criminals, but let's run with that. But LAWhammer has right at the outset one of the choices that you could make. one of the NPCs in LAWhammer, a chap by the name of Lucas, is there right from the very beginning because he is in the employ of one of the PCs. And Lucas is an extremely handy vehicle for providing skill gap help, because he can do things that the other PCs simply can't. It does, however, often turn into antagonism, because his idea of what should be done is often very different to the kids that are around him, because all the PCs in LAWhammer are basically children. They're all in their late teens, early 20s, and they're kids, and it's easy to forget that because their players are not kids. None of them are kids, but the players absolutely are nailing their rather childish characters who have childish notions, and sometimes petulant views, and sometimes quite huffy responses to certain actions. And Lucas is a much older character in his late 50s, and is balanced and often exasperated by those PCs, but he plugs up some skill gaps. So what I'm saying with all of that is you can use an NPC. There's nothing wrong with having NPCs plug skill gaps, and there's nothing wrong with an NPC coming along with the party as long as it makes sense for the party as a whole. I would also suggest not worrying too much about it, because there's very little in the enemy within that requires a certain set of skills. It's kind of not a core component of how the enemy within works. It's kind of useful to have someone who can actually fight something, and I would recommend that at least one person does. It's kind of useful to have someone who's studious. It's kind of useful to have someone who can speak to other people, but kind of useful is not necessary. Many of the conflicts with cleverness can be entirely avoided. So I would be more concerned with building a group that works together, and during your session zero, so as you're setting up your characters, rolling them all up, having a good conversation with everyone that effectively says, what do you all want from this game? Because this is what the game's going to offer. We're going on a big ass adventure, which means whatever characters you create, their motivations must align with this. And I would say that is much more important than worrying about one skill or another skill. That's having a bunch of players playing characters who all are, for whatever their own individual reasons are, about to go on a big ass adventure and are willing to do that. Indeed, again, using LAWhammer as an example, I purposefully used characters in LAWhammer that were not just looking to go on a big ass adventure, but their personal stories were the story of the upcoming campaign. One of the characters, for example, was directly tied through to the whole civil war that was going to be coming, Gerhardt. One of them was tied to Middenheim and the cult of Sigmar, which would help with the whole schisms that are going to be coming along there. That was Leopold. One of them, again, comes from Middenheim, on the more Ulrican side, and also had a whole host of, let's say, connections with something that's very important to the overall story. I won't spoil it, but Birdie has some unique characteristics in her past that made the story of the enemy within her story. And indeed, I can do this for all of the characters. Each one of them was specifically designed to slot into the story that was coming, so that when the players encountered it, they didn't do this. What's that got to do with me? Why am I even bothering with this? Who cares about all of this shit? They didn't do that because they're going, shit, this is my life. It's all going up and ended. Oh, fuck, what do I do? It's a personal tale for them. So while you're building your characters, remember that stats and careers are not everything that a character is. Their backstory, who they are, and how they connect with everything else is really important. Birdie, for example, was just a rat catcher when it comes to what she was in career development. But if you have watched any of LAWhammer, you'll be aware that just a rat catcher in no way sums up what Birdie is. Similarly, Lindsay's character, an elf, was just a spy. That's it. But if you've watched LAWhammer, I mean, it doesn't take very long for you to realize that she is a great deal more than just a spy. Building unique and interesting characters can often make a big difference for how they will join up with the campaign if those unique and interesting characters are tied to the story you're about to tell. One of the, just to finish on that, difficulties of playing a pre-published campaign is ensuring that the players want to play through it and are motivated to do so, which I would suggest during your session 0 should be entirely pinned down. It's their job to create characters that are going to be motivated to play the adventure that you're about to spin before them, which means that you're going to have to be open with them about what is about to come. And you don't need to go into details like you're going to be facing off against this individual and he's going to have stats that are this high, which means you need to create a character that can cope with that. No, none of that bollocks. You can just think about the stories that are to come and think about how you can lace the characters that they're building into that. Hopefully that gives you at least some ideas there. Hey, Dynaman! Had an idea for 2 Skaven clans. Tan Toxis, because of course Skaven clans are always named like this. Thrall of Skyer, specialise in making poison, win death for the globe, seems fair. And Clan Bristle, is that how you pronounce it? Bristyle, if you prefer. But Clan Bristle, all of them, they're monsters, have quills. It's Bristle, because porcupines are rodents. Yeah, not bad at all. Mornington Crescent, I am starting a new tabletop game soon as a player. Oh, superb. I want to break out of my normal comfort zones. Great. I tend to play quiet, supportive types. We have a couple of very expansive players on the table. Any advice for someone trying a more direct role for the first time? Yes, I do. Build a character that is direct and is how can I sum this up succinctly? Because I don't want to spend a long time discussing different character builds here. Whatever character it is, you are ultimately going to be responsible for how that character is going to be portrayed. That is your part of the role-playing experience. And if you want to play something that is different, you are going to have to make a conscious effort to do something different. One of the easiest ways to do this is to, in your own head, go, I'm going to do this first. So the first step is deciding to do it, and then deciding what that difference is. I would suggest come up with 3 words that describe this character that are perhaps different to how you would normally roleplay. Perhaps direct. So they are always going to be confronting matters. Perhaps aggressive. Perhaps loud. Perhaps a doer, a mover, a shaker. There's lots of different things you can do. Get 3 words, each of them different, each of which encapsulate a part of the character that you want to portray. Now, don't be a slave to them, because you might find that you're uncomfortable in those areas, but one of the joys of roleplay is trying out different things, trying out different characters. So find those 3 words, and when you come down for your first session, have them in front of you on your character sheet, have them nice and clearly there, and try to nail it. Now, different people will find this easy or hard. Some people find it very difficult to roleplay out of their standard social expectations for how they carry themselves. And those challenges can be handled in different ways. Some people just like winging it, diving in and going, no, today I am going to be assertive. That's my character trait. And I'm going to make sure that I am assertive. So when I see something, I'm going to state my point very clearly to everybody else. And I'm going to make sure that I am a more leader style character than a supportive style character. So when a problem arises, I'm going to always be first to step up and ask others how we think we should proceed, and then try to make the decision to proceed next. And there is already the beginning of a process for how to handle that. So you've got your 3 words, say one of them is assertive. If you find it difficult to just wing it, take your 3 words and give a quotation for each one that you think will help you best manage to portray that particular character trait. Because that will give you something to say at the table that also supports the character trait that you're trying to do. As much as we probably know this, it's worth stating. Roleplay sessions aren't that long. We only have so many words that we say. We don't say an awful lot. Now, that's not quite true. Sometimes we'll be saying hundreds of words, loads of conversations. But often your character might only get 7, 8, 9, 10 times to actually dig in with something. So if you've got yourself 3 strong prepared quotations for the character type that you're trying to nail, you will already have taken up maybe half of the conversations that you might have during the course of that session with something that you've got pre-prepared. And it doesn't need to be a word for word quotation. In fact, I strongly advise it isn't. The point is the tone, what you're attempting to do. So for example, being assertive, you might want to have a quotation which is nice and clearly strong. Being a leader, you might want to have one that is effectively showing how you have leadership skills. So asking questions of others so that decisions can be made is one of the easiest ways of doing that. Questions are surprisingly powerful for gathering information, because people, whenever they're asked questions, tend to just answer. Most people, when they are asked a question, will go, okay, yeah, I think this should happen. And then you can put yourself in a position to then judge and declare and say whether it's a good idea or not, as you hopefully can then lead them towards, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's now do that. You are taking control of the leadership. So a quick quotation for each one of those, and hopefully that will get you going off in a slightly different direction to what you would normally do. I hope that helped, Morrington Crescent. Bring up the comment one more time for people who want to read that if they're watching rather than just listening. And we will drop down to the next one. Hey, Dynaman. I feel like the big 4 Empire provinces, Talabheim is of the big 4, Talabheim is underrated. Reichland is the main character. Wissenland has known, so industry. Middenland is like the more barbarian rival of Reichland. Talabheim is also there. Oh, I really hard disagree with this, but I've written a lot of material. Yeah, no, Talabheim is a character. We did a stream some time ago about each one of the grand provinces of the Empire. So this is one of the older ones that we did some time ago, Sotek and I, where we dived into each one of the grand provinces and then we rated them. It was one of our Wednesday streams. And Talabheim has extraordinary importance, not just because of its long history within the Empire, but also because it was outside of the Empire for an extremely long period of time, over 1,000 years, and Sigmarism was banned. Completely banned. They considered Sigmar to not be a god. They considered Sigmar to be the freaking worst. And that was a thing. The Attilan emperors, coming back from Attilia the First, who was the first one who declared herself empress of her own empire that was centered around the great Eye of the Forest, the massive crater that's 30 miles in diameter, where Talabheim, the capital city of Talabheim, can be found. That city is impregnable, and people went to war with them. When they declared separate, they lost again and again. One of those wars is detailed in the very first one, actually, with Attilia, is detailed in a book called Empire at War, which came from Black Library. I recommend that purely because I did work for that book. I might be slightly biased. But yeah, Talabheim is the exceedingly warlike forest folks, if you will, of the Empire, and they have a long history and story. If you want to know more about them, I recommend Terror in Talabheim. It's got a lot of really cool stuff in there. And Reichland is not the main character. Reichland is the richest. They're the fops. And Talabheim doesn't like that either. I think they get quite a lot of material. I'm not entirely sure if I agree with you there. Okay, moving down. Slide. Yup. Charles CK. Any chance you guys will sell a PDF print of the Dark Deeds art? Yeah, but we have considered it this side. We have not made a decision. You previously said you need to talk to Mark. I did about it. So, Charles CK, we have discussed it. It hasn't been done. The Rookery is... The Rookery's in an interesting place right now where we're waiting for something to occur, and we just don't know if it's occurring or not, and we're sort of sitting there treading water. A decision will be made about this probably after that has landed, one way or the other. So I would like to think it would happen because I think it'd be a super fun PDF. I think that the art is gorgeous, and the more we get to use it, the better. There is tons of really artful pieces in there that, for those of you using virtual tabletops or equivalent, you get a lot of use out of it. So yeah, I think there's definitely something in that. And Mark wasn't against the idea. It's just he's been doing other things, so it has not been pinned down, and an answer was not directly gathered. Dynamite, I think the Elven Pass thing is actually a great idea. I thought that one of the differences between the Azure and the Druchii would be absolute freedom falling into debauchery versus society being too restrictive to the point where it's stifling. Honestly, the 40k Elder do that society quite well, and the paths are kind of similar in how their society functions. So the paths in our game apply to the Druchii as much as they apply to the Azure, as much as they apply to the Aeonir, as much as they apply to the Azrai. The paths are an almost universal constant in the LAWhammer version of the Warhammer world. And all the elves, to a degree, pretty much are on a path. Even those that don't even believe that they are. It's just a core component of the elven psyche and how they bring their balance into manifest reality and avoid, of course, the depredations of Slaanesh, who is looking to eat their souls. But what you say, and let's just bring that comment back up, the absolute freedom versus debauchery, falling to debauchery, society, restrictive, all that, is still part of the paths. The absolute freedom is part of some of the paths. The restrictive nature of the Kadai gods is a part of the paths. The alternative from the underworld gods and how they view the world in very different ways, also part of the paths. They all move themselves down different routes towards what they believe is the best way to achieve success. Okay, moving down to Dynamite again. Are there any magical items or other ways a Nehekaran character could go into non-undead societies without simply covering their face? Yeah. All sorts of stuff could do this, and it's a core component. In fact, it's in a story or two as well, just thinking about it. But the answer to this is yes. The Warhammer world is a magical place, and it has entire magics that focus around illusions, changing from one thing to another, and puffing up flesh to make it look like it's healthier, or although let's be honest, it's going to take more than just puffing up flesh for most Nehekarans. I can't believe I said that, but nevertheless, there's all manner of magic that can be deployed, and Nehekara is somewhat known for its many magical artifacts also. So the answer to this is just simply yes, but another answer is why. And whenever you're creating an artifact of this ilk, you've got to have a strong reason for why they do it. You've got to remember that a lot of the Nehekarans are either somewhat proud of their weird, unique status, or alternatively hate it with a passion, and do believe they should have their big golden bodies. So why are these artifacts created? Who holds them? What are their limitations? Why don't they always use them if they're successful? Is the illusion just seen to be just almost a petty concern? Only a weak-willed idiot would cover themselves with such a glamour. Is that part of the social situation as it stands, or is it something different? You need to have some really good thought as to the ramifications of the artifacts you create, and also why they've been created and what their flaws are. I don't like creating magical artifacts that are broadly too powerful and useful. The Bloat Person. Could the grey men from Musalon be thought of as corrupted naiads? In a similar fashion, could there also be a similar version of corrupted dryads? So yes is the answer to that, Bloat Person. Yeah, you'll find that in a lot of the Bretonnian lore, there's a lot of different spirits. Some of them you might be surprised at. There's obviously a lot of watery spirits. The idea of naiads and indeed oceanids and other types of effectively Greek-inspired spirit types are all over the place. And could you have similar versions of corrupted dryads? Well, yes, is the answer to that. We have a variety of different corrupted dryads already. There's a certain Beastman special character who's been responsible for a lot of corruption over in Athel Loren, and that means that it can get worse than what has already occurred. There are going to be some who have completely corrupted in ways that you don't expect. They are, after all, spirits, and spirits are not don't conform to the physical reality and the physical rules that others do, which means that they can and sometimes do change. Indeed, there are many who would suggest that the various spirits of the Warhammer world are just demons under a different name anyway, just demons that people find acceptable, unlike the Chaos demons who are doing everything in their power to bring everything crashing down around everyone's ears. Sin Box, thank you very much, appreciated. Talking new Skaven clans, I have a new great clan homebrew for Age of Sigmar to make Age of Sigmar Skaven a little distinct from Warhammer Fantasy. I mean, it does need it, doesn't it? And then out of my drawing pad, dies. Oh, no musical demon summoning clan Screech for me. No, your drawing pad died. It's one of my least favorite things. I have, he said to get rid of the comment here, pardon me, Sintbox. I have my big pad sitting down there, which cost me bajillions of pounds. And it looks all sorts of kind of cool there. Yeah, I'm working, always got stuff on that. I have that, the big massive screen version, because the drawing pads that I used to have, and I used to use Wacom pads all the time for drawing away on, the drawing pads that I used to work on were bluntly prone to breaking, because I would drop them all the time, because I would often be working on my laptop and my drawing on my knee, or I would just be lounging in my chair with the drawing pad, because I didn't draw on the table because I'm a constant fidgeter. I move around, I'm going from place to place. Can't fidget with a giant fucking screen. I mean, it turns and it moves around and it does stuff, but I can't fidget with it, which means I don't break it. So if you've got the money, I think they're awesome and really good. I also recommend drawing on iPads or equivalent of and the iPad to be the best to draw on. They work really well too if you haven't done so already. Indeed, that might be your drawing pad of choice. Dinoman, to clarify, it was Talbot land is super important for all the reasons you've stated. Yes, it is. It's just more an external media and how it comes across that its importance isn't emphasized, hence why it's underrated. There's sort of a reason for this. It's because Talbot didn't get its Electra count in Warhammer Battle 4th edition. They just didn't bother with him. Helmut Feuerbach, never bothered with. That guy, who the fuck is he? So thus, he got skipped over. Now, you might go, Countess Emmanuel never got used either. No, but her city was given weapons instead. So they characterized the Nuln armies through her city, the Forges of Nuln, where the more archer-based Talabek archers that you might get were bounced off by Hochland long guns, or the Stirland archers down towards the south. So all of the things that they might have had in their army that was unique was never in any of the army list. All of the Tal-facing troops were never used. So thus, Talabikland was never, in the greater scheme of things, that supported by Warhammer. And thus, didn't really get much. Fantasy Roleplay game, though, did do more. So I agree with you. The general feel for Talabikland is not as strong as it is for the others. Particularly, look at Middenheim. But a lot of that is just simply down to the way that Warhammer presented them. Moving down to Hannibal. Are there incarnate elements of high and dark magic? Well, that's certainly a question, isn't it? So, high magic is not something that, strictly speaking, exists by itself. So the answer would presumably be no. But whenever you say no, the answer turns into yes. Dark magic, however, does. Dar naturally occurs. Now, as naturally as magic can never be said to occur, whenever magic stagnates and gathers in areas and doesn't move like the winds of magic are supposed to move, and the magic swirls into this tarry pool of dar, this is often the case where, for example, one of the great nodes in the network of stone pillars that channel the waystones, channel all the magic over to the vortex in Ulthuan. Whenever one of those is damaged or corrupted for one reason or another, all the winds of magic gather around it and then become fetid, and they turn to Dar. Dar pops up all over the place. Loads of people using dark magic causes more Dar to settle in the local area. So there's almost certainly one of that, because the magic is there, and that means that the very process of what creates incarnate elements, it's going to cause them to occur. High, though, is not naturally occurring, but that doesn't mean that people wouldn't do it, because writers love to do that shit. So I would suggest that the answer to both of these is yeah, but for high magic, probably no. But I could make one. I think I could make one work quite well within the setting as it currently stands. I'm going to write a comment from Hannibal in this one, actually. Or it might be argued that actually many of the gods themselves are incarnations of high magic. that perhaps belief in divine magic is actually a kind of personified high magic. You can argue anything in Warhammer. So Hannibal, I'm not going to disagree with you because you could definitely argue this, and you could argue it pretty strongly and maybe even convincingly. But I think the answer to this is no, they are not. Gods are many things in Warhammer. They are not just one thing. And some of them are collections of emotion, if you believe such things. Some of them are collections of ideas. Some of them are souls that have gathered together of a like mind. So it's not so much an emotion, it's more of an intellectual state. Some of them are natural denizens of the aether. They were there before any mind was influencing the aether. The aether is not like the warp in 40k. It has its own natural denizens, and it's quite different. So kind of no is actually the answer to this one. High magic is not an etheric state. High magic is the winds of magic in the material realm repurposed by those who have the capability to use all of the winds of magic into a more powerful form. It's not a natural state. It's effectively a very powerful form of magic. Pretty much it. Dark magic is even more powerful than high magic, much to the consternation of people who like high magic. It's a lot more dangerous though, and it is also corrupting. High magic and dark magic work surprisingly well in tandem. For example, to pull a nice little detail from the topic that was supposed to be discussed today, during the Sundering, Malekith was using high magic. Now, this might come as a surprise to many of you who go, what, Malekith? Wait, does Malarian? What? He uses dark magic. No. He's a master of high magic. And his mother was using dark magic. And the pair of them worked in tandem when they were working together. And were extraordinarily powerful because of that. This is something that also happens amongst the Wood Elves, where the Wood Elves often have their high and dark wizards, their spell singers, working together in tandem. So, yeah, dark magic is all the magic crunched together in a powerful, nasty form. High magic is all of the magic crunched together in a far safer, but very difficult to create form. And I'm going to answer a particular question that just came up from that one, because I do think it's worth mentioning. Where is it? I just saw it. There it is, elemental exposure. High magic's rainbow magic then. Well, you might say that. No, it's not. And it's expressly not, but also, yes, it is. And I'll explain that a little bit more. For those of you who don't know what rainbow magic is, back in the day when the colleges of magic, when the idea of the winds of magic, when the idea of just magic in Warhammer was first codified, there were certain schools of magic put in place. One of them was the Dark College, and one of them was the Rainbow College. And the Rainbow College took the space of what is now called high magic. And it is the natural predecessor to what became high magic. However, as everything was developed and the concept of rainbow magic was dumped and repurposed, the description for high magic was repurposed again, you'll find that the descriptors for rainbow magic and high magic are different, and you could easily have high magic and rainbow magic side by side in the setting with very different outcomes, because rainbow magic is binding threads of the winds separately. High magic is not. High magic is a very different style of magic. So the answer to that is not quite. Just to carry on with what Hannibal's saying, so gods, as collections of etheric energy, are themselves intrinsically beings made of high magic in the same way that atoms in our world are bound together by gravity. No. And expressly, no. Because what you're doing is you're mixing the real world of Warhammer, the empirical world, with the aether. The aether is not made of the stuff of the real world. High magic comes from the real world. The winds of magic come seeping in from the gates at both poles and from various other places all around the Warhammer world, because there's all manner of rents and tears and sources of magic and warpstone and worse that are leaking winds of magic. The winds of magic are not the aether. They are not etheric power. They are material power. They are what happens to the aether when it comes into the material realm. It is not what magic is like on the other side. On the other side, in the aether, it's completely different. The winds of magic are just material exhaust in some respects. And high magic pulls all of that together and uses it in a very powerful, hopefully safe way, unlike Dar, which is very powerful, deeply unsafe, but exceedingly powerful way. And very corruptive. So, loosely speaking, the gods aren't made of anything like any of the winds of magic or high magic. They are made of their own unique etheric stuff. And then that bleeds into the real world, winds of magic might result. But it's not what they're made of, because they are made of something from a different dimension. The stuff that happens in the material realms, in the mortal realms, is completely unlike what the gods and their core stuff is made of. They are arguably related, but they are not the same. I'm not entirely sure if I've explained that clearly enough. Hopefully I have. The book person, if GW gave you the chance to alter a mechanical element of the lore, what would you change? For example, Dawi runes craft or Lizardman spawning mechanics. Huh, interesting. Let's keep it on the subject of the day, because this is a super fun one about Morathi. Did you know Morathi could use dwarf runes? That might surprise you. That's how she tempted many of the Kalador wizards to her side. She basically traded off her knowledge of dwarven runes so that they could put them onto their great weapons that they're creating in the Forges of Vol. So the great Volish priests, their priest wizards, so to speak, were crafting weapons, and she traded with them for effectively support during the Sundering and gave them dwarf runes. But that is not possible in the current rule set, because the current rule set gives each one of the individual species a set of rules that are often unique for them. But that's not what it's like in the Warhammer world. In the Warhammer world, if someone can do it, anyone can do it, as long as they get into the right place. Everyone goes, humans can't do high magic, but we have examples of humans doing high magic all over the place. It's a thing that occurs. Humans can't do a whole host of things they can actually do. Look at what Nagash became. He's a human. At least he was. But he's a human. Vampires are effectively humans in a variety of new and exciting ways. Everyone can do almost everything. Dwarf runesmithing is not unique to the dwarfs because others have done it. But the battle game made everything unique. If I could change anything, it would be opening up the roleplay rule set so that it wasn't so restrictive in a host of ways, because the world and the background isn't that restrictive. So that's an interesting little one. And it's also nice to tie it back to what should have been the subject for today, because Morathi taught dwarven rune magic to Vol priests. I love that detail. It's super cool. Mr. Vaughan, hiya, and thanks. How much did you bribe the mortuary cult to get their priests to advertise dark deeds in Warhammer 3? Scandalous. It's not just the mortuary cult. Is it Morathi that keeps on saying that she's up to her dark deeds? Yeah, the Dark Elves do it all over the place. I remember because when I was last playing the Dark Elves, they were constantly going on about their dark deeds, and it made me laugh so much. And indeed, if you're sitting listening to this stream, I would like it just to sink into your conscience that whenever you're playing Total War Warhammer and you hear the words dark deeds, that you should immediately buy a copy for yourself, your friends, your partners. You know, say it with dark deeds. Why not propose with dark deeds? But yes, the bribe was really high. I don't want to go into details, but it probably involved a magical artifact that allowed one of them to pass as human when they were having a holiday in Estalia. Federico Velasquez. I have almost certainly pronounced your name wrong because I'm Scottish. Andy, could you explain then how signature lore of magic work for different factions? Saw the new Wind of Mist, lore of Yin Yang, etc. Yeah, so broadly speaking, in fact, I think actually Creative Assembly had a quick discussion about this in their stream as well when they were discussing the lore of mists. And they sort of hand wave it where there's lots of lores of magic and they draw upon the winds of magic in different ways and create different outcomes, and different schools of magic teach different types of magic. And the lores of magic are not just simply restricted to the 8 winds of magic and thus 8 lores, plus then you start to fall apart when you just try to base it on 8 winds of magic, because there are so many other lores. There is different conflicting in world justifications for this. Ice magic, for example, what is it? And there's different answers for that in world. Indeed, even the ice witches themselves have a little bit of an argument as to exactly what ice magic is and where its particular provenance is, which is, I think, fun. But things like the winds of mist make total sense. The lore of yin and yang make absolute sense if you look into them, because that's just combining basically half the winds of magic into a whole host of effects. It's a minor equivalent of high magic to a degree in its own way. So lore of yin and yang makes sense. It's basically just a different way. I'm going out of focus there. Who needs to see me in focus anyway, because I'm old. Yeah, so it's just a different way of using the winds of magic to an outcome. This requires more justification on the roleplay side, though, because simply adding in new lores without explaining how they work is a crime, particularly when you're dealing with, say, for example, the lore of mists. What is it doing? What winds of magic do you need to master to be able to cast it? What is the core element here? Because mist would be tied to Gyron, that's the very liquid green wind of magic, and it would be tied to Ulgu, the very misty, strangely enough, wind of magic. And those two together would be required for this lore of mists to probably work in the way that you expect. Plus, it might have other aspects in there as well. So it would require you to already know multiple winds of magic, as it also requires you for, say, yin and yang. You need to learn how the lores work. And that's, broadly speaking, what's required for those weird multiple lores. Hope that helps. I'm not entirely sure if that's the question you were asking, though. Mornington Crescent, thank you very much. Cheer, cheer, cheer. For a what if, I do like what ifs. They're always fun. Let me just raise my head up here for those of you who are watching. There we go. Yeah, I am up here. What if the secrets of the rune of sorcery had not been lost? I think it's a lot more than runes would be more common, since if it's no great secret and runes can be inscribed by even minor clans, I can see the Dawi may have even spread it amongst their allies, turning the humans into runesmiths instead of the colleges, and denying the elven foothold in the empire that Techlist allowed them. So Morathi Crescent, I think this is a really good one. So for those of you out there who don't know what the rune of sorcery is, cut a long story short, it's on their anvils of doom, and it's on their great anvils that they can inscribe their big runes. There is, however, we go into the roleplay game, a lot of mixing up in there, because there's a lot of very simple runic rules put in place where across the editions, Anvil of Doom, Rune of Sorcery, not so needed. But that all aside, Mornington Crescent, I think there is definitely something to that. Mount Thunder, where the great Anvils of Doom were originally created, it got attacked, blown up. The Runes of Sorcery and the secrets of it were lost forever, which means there's a very limited number of Anvils of Doom. It also suggests that Morathi has an Anvil of Doom, if you believe such things, because she probably gave one of them over to the Smiths of Vol. That's just going back to the earlier comment about Morathi knowing about Dwarven runes and how they work. So, yeah, I think that makes for an interesting what if, just to bring it back up again, because the secrets of the Rune of Sorcery is, inevitably, it comes from their ancestors' god. They're not going to be sharing it with anyone if they possibly can. I don't think they would be given the secrets of their runes over to, say, the Empire. It's just not how the dwarves work. It's their legacy and what they do. But it would be much more prevalent across the Karazhan, like much more prevalent. And that being the case, we would almost certainly have a great deal of tech theft. It would have occurred, which means others would have gained access to that technology. There could be something in that, because it is ultimately technology, just like any other. And just to bring this comment up, because it makes me smile. Humans can only use one wind of magic. Lilith, hold my grail. Yes, and yeah, it's not Lilith in my world. Yeah, don't you dare, Dragonite. Lilith. That makes absolutely no sense. Anyway, I'll get past that before I get really angry about the end times again. Gary Girianson, I hope I pronounced your name right. Hi, Andy. Hi. What can you tell me about the first peoples in the old world, or the folks of Drachenfels, or any humanoid come from the stars? Because Hungarians at 11 come from Sirius and Eretruscans. Interesting. I like this. So, this is something we have quite a lot of answers to, and of course the answers here contradict because different writers have given us different replies. It's one of the reasons why it's often difficult to answer questions with definitive answers, because writers overwrite each other all the time, and if we're being true to the overall setting rather than just one writer's vision, we end up with different answers. So humans were on the Warhammer world when the old ones came. Proto-humans might be a better descriptor. What we also know about the Warhammer world at this point is that it was further away from the sun, their sun, Sol, further back from it, and there was effectively a giant ice age. And most of the humans were relatively close to the equator, where there was some jungles and lots of different types of environmental biomes. Humans were there. And depending upon which version of the story you go with, some of them saw the arrival of the old ones. The old ones then reconstructed the Warhammer world, rebuilt its continents, and moved it closer to the sun as part of their great work to repurpose the Warhammer world into something that was better for them and their plan. The world became much warmer, and during this process, humanity was uplifted. We don't know much about this process, but we do know that it happened in probably at least two places. One is Albion. We discussed this in our Albion stream previously, and in Albion, humans were given magic that bluntly goes against everything Teclis teaches about magic. And these early humans were exceedingly powerful wizards. Wizards that make elves go, that's not fair, that seems wrong, they can't do that. But they did. They would eventually become the Truth Speakers, the Druidic families, the Jade Order, the descendants of all of these, and the Belfani peoples, for example, that you can find in the Empire before the arrival of the tribes of Sigmar. They all come from the humans that came from Albion. But we also have another group that probably came from down in the Southlands and migrated out of the jungles from down there too. Although exactly how that works, we can't be absolutely clear. And there's also another set of humans, and this is where it gets a bit complicated, because Grand Cathay apparently has humans in it predating the Cataclysm. And these humans are not marked as being uplifted, which means, was there really any uplifting? Did they do anything to humanity? Well, the answer is yes, they constantly say they did, but did they? Because the Cathayans, were they uplifted? Are they just migrating humans that arrived in the area from what the old ones were doing and then were uplifted, or is it something else? The history here makes not a great deal of sense. So while I bring this one up here, first peoples of the old world, yes, and probably several different races of human across the world. Several of them, all of them, some of them were uplifted by the old ones. You could argue some of them were uplifted by dragons if you prefer. But the other question is really interesting. Did any humanoid come from the stars? There is no direct proof of this. But there has been more than one rewrite in the lore that has allowed things like this to occur. The first spawning of Slann occurs in the Warhammer world, and the most ancient Slann all come from the Warhammer world. Then they rewrote it. Some of the Slann came with the old ones. The uplifting process could have been a transporting process. We are dealing with a spacefaring species. The old ones weren't just spacefaring, they were dimension hoppers also. They were taking peoples from other worlds The idea that humanity came from another world is entirely consistent with what they are. We know the orc spores, assuming we go with the spore option, came from another world along with the old ones. The other planets of the Warhammer system are probably populated, which is very odd for many people to consider, but they probably are. We know the moon is populated. Mansleep was populated. The old ones are up there. There's shapeshifters and other weird stuff up there too. There's a strong likelihood humanity may have come with them as well, or at least one of the races of humanity may have come, or one of the uplifted options. Who knows? You want to mess around with that? You can do so. There is also another fun aspect to all of this, which is when the chaos gates collapse and the demons come pouring through, corruption spreads everywhere. We know that the warp is connected to everywhere. There is literally nothing stopping what we know happens already occurring right at this point. We may have had the first arrival of aliens, for want of a better description, coming in through the Chaos Gates, being summoned by the demons. That was a flip to what many people expect. Some of the first fallen to Chaos may have actually arrived with them as an army. That is consistent with the setting as it works. So you could very easily have humanity be an imposing species. This is something that was toyed with early Warhammer, and there's a reason for that, because I know I've said this before, but this is what Michael Moorcock did repeatedly. Michael Moorcock, somewhat famously in several of his books, having the equivalent of the elves being the native species, and then the humans were brought in by chaos as an invasive species. And that 100% could occur. There is nothing saying that that doesn't happen, but there is definitely many things saying that there were humans on world already beforehand. But that doesn't mean that they weren't also brought in by the old ones. There's lots of different routes you could take, and it's fine to do so. This is effectively a sci-fi setting. It's not a fantasy setting at its root. And you can go almost anywhere with it, and you will not be contradicting what the setting has set up. So if you want to have effectively Chaos Space Marines coming in through the gates, you can. You absolutely can. Old 40k and Warhammer used to do that frequently. There's a reason a lot of the artifacts of the old ones that you get in Warhammer 6th edition that were used inside the Dark Shadows campaign were all 40k equipment. It's because the 40k universe is connected to the Warhammer universe. It's all part of the same great warp-connected nonsense. And if you want to import parts of that, feel free. Go wild. There's nothing wrong with it. This is all made up. Warhammer's made up. You can go wild. Have fun with it. I know I certainly do. I've played entire campaigns that have tied 40k and Warhammer together. I've mentioned this multiple times in previous streams. I've even pointed people towards some pictures of various things that I had where Warhammer characters and 40k characters had been interacting. You can do that crazy shit for your own games at home. Games Workshop don't do that, nor will they ever do that again, one presumes. But they might, because Games Workshop are known for cycling back to their own ideas as they nostalgically wax lyrical on what they used to do, bring it back for a bit, and then someone says, no, you shouldn't do that, and then they make it disappear again. So the answer to your question, if we're being direct, Gary, is, can we tell about the first peoples of the old world? Yeah, there was a bunch. And if we're just sticking with the old world, Albion is most certainly where the uplifted humans were sourced from. The folks about Drachenfels were probably humanity of the old world that weren't yet uplifted, some of whom would have been. Any humanoids come from the stars? You know what? Probably. Because Hungarians, as we discussed already, have a lovely little story. Elemental exposure. Viewer, ask yes, no question. Andy, not really, but yes too, and definitely maybe. Elemental exposure, thanks very much, and you're right. That's sadly an answer I have to do, but I think it's also to the strength of Warhammer, because it means that we can create it in our own ways without ever really worrying too much about contradicting things, because Games Workshop have already contradicted themselves in 12 places, so why can't we too? Skylar Martin, say a player wants to create their own lore of magic with lore master rules, etc. How would you do that? Carefully. I was intending And when I had the plan for the Warhammer 4th edition Realms of Magic book, as it was called at that point, on having a chapter about spell creation. But the chapter that I was intending at that point wasn't lore creation, which is an entirely different kettle of fish. That's an entirely unique, difficult, and fundamentally world shifting in terms of its potential approach process, where creating new spells is something that actually happens quite a lot. If we look at the colleges of magic, it has a set curriculum of spells that it teaches. And these set curriculum of spells are laid down in grimoires, and they're passed on from apprentice, and probably from master down to apprentice, from master down to apprentice. But over the course of the 200 years or so that the Colleges of Magic have been around, they have added to the initial curriculum as presented by Teclis et al. At the beginning, the foundation points of the Colleges of Magic, with newer spells, some of which are updates of existing spells, some of which are twisting on that. And I wanted to write rules for that. I don't think it'd be particularly difficult. It's all about different enunciations of the lingua prestantia, which is the language of magic that is used by the wizards. And it's also a somewhat universal idea, because for all it sometimes feels daft that people in different parts of the Warhammer world are all basically casting the same spells, it's not daft, because it's the same words that have to be used everywhere to get certain effects. If you want to make a fireball, you have to say the right words in whatever language of magic you're attempting to deploy. And no matter what you call that language of magic, it's still the same sounds. Because sounds, when they combine with the winds of magic, create certain outcomes. So it's the same spells, often under completely different names, that are being taught all over the Warhammer world, or learned, or manifested, because some witches are entirely self-made. And by that I mean, they don't have a lore of magic. They just got random spells that they can do because it's sort of sunk into their head. This is a magical world where spells themselves are often alive and can sink into people's minds. There's indeed even demons out there trying to capture all of these spells and bring them back to Tzeentch. There is all manner of fun you can do with magic, but on this one, it would be the focus of an entire campaign, not something you would do in downtime. It's not something you could do over the course of a year or two. This is like a life's work, and it would probably fail in comparison to creating spells, which is months' work. This is big. So I would make it the focus of an entire story. I'm not entirely sure how useful that is to you, but that's what I would do with it. Federico, hey Andy, hiya. Is there any other way runic systems, aside from the dwarf ones, to inscribe magic in objects? Yes, there is. Does any other culture develop anything else? Yeah, there's runes all over the place. I recommend reading the descriptions for all the various magic items that you find in the magic item box sets for Warhammer 4th edition, Warhammer 5th edition as the box set, and then it collapses in 6th edition into just the army list providing the magical artifacts. But still, read them. You'll be surprised at how many of the artifacts supposedly created by wizards of the colleges of magic are runic. One of the things that we were going to be doing for the Realms of Magic book, as it was planned out, I had that book planned. It just hadn't been written. I was set up to write about a quarter of it, and the other 3/4 were going to be other people. That book was also going to have rules for runic items that were not created by the dwarfs. Runic items in Warhammer have been a core component of Warhammer since, in terms of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, since the first edition. The first edition has an entire set of rules for creating different runes, and they're nothing to do with the dwarves. They are just to do with wizards and the things that they can inscribe, and we're going to be updating that entire concept. At that point, I had permission to do so from Games Workshop. They were like, yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's literally written into most of the magic items that we have. Loads of swords have got runes, loads of elf swords have got runes on them as well. They're elven runes that they've managed to craft. Runic items are not dwarf alone, but the dwarf versions of runic items are pretty freaking special. The rules that we were going to be creating were going to be, by comparison to the dwarf equivalent, relatively low key. So does any other culture develop anything else? The answer to all of that is yes. Well, have I missed something in this one? What happened to parts 2 to 24? Did I miss something? Oh, I see what you're saying, because it's an Ask Andy Anything. So, Devin, I've just suddenly realized what you're talking about. Devin, Sotek was supposed to be here today for part 2 of Morathi and wasn't, so I'm doing Ask Andy Anything, which is the 24th one? I think that was it, or be on 25. I can't remember what's marked as on the video. But I've done a bunch of these videos in the past, and I'll be updating the image that's currently over on YouTube once the stream ends so that it actually matches the new video description, and I will also update that. I like this one. Blind Lobster. Hedge magic is evil, burn the witch. You sound like a Sigmarite. Hedge magic is not evil. What they call hedge magic is, but hedge magic itself isn't. It's divine in many respects. Hedge magic is a very different thing, and if you're not aware of it, there's a few good places you could check. Shades of Empire for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition has a really nice description about what hedge magic originally was and what the Sigmarites have completely got wrong about what hedge wizardry is, and it's also one of the core careers, hedge wizard, of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition, and it doesn't come hand in hand with all of the evil dar that does come hand in hand with those who are just witches learning magic without any control, possibly just figuring it out for themselves. They are very much the types that the Sigmarites say burn the witch about, but often they are just burning proper old hedge witches who are, in the greater scheme of things, kind of safe and are worshipping gods. They believe they are the blessed few. They believe they've been blessed by the gods to empower what they can do with special magical words, which are ultimately just the winds of magic being controlled by the version of the lingua prestantia, the language of magic, one more time. Yeah, as Hawk Audley there says, yeah, no Sotek, just an Ask Andy Anything. Yeah, just an Ask Andy Anything. I've reached almost the end of my questions, but I will bring up Somores903. Almost certainly pronounced your name wrong. Do you think Miao Ying and small roster that Games Workshop released is just thematic, and later we'll see them go Cathay when other dragons are released as minis and have the rest of the roster in versus their neighbors like in Koresh and So, since Games Workshop has this thing now of releasing one half of an army and going to design the other half from scratch? Yeah, that seems likely. It seems very likely to me that we're probably going to change theater as we move into Old World 2nd edition. We've got the arrival of Cathay. Cathay is going to be freaking popular. They're going to have Total War is going to be diving into some new areas, I presume, and that's going to give them a surfeit of cool material to hopefully bring in. One presumes we'll get Kislev in this edition, maybe, especially because they've done Cathay. Then we'll head off into a new editions at some point. They're going to need one because the current edition has quite a few rule holes. They'll new edition up, and it wouldn't surprise me if the next edition isn't the old world. It's, I don't know, the East or some equivalent, and the armies of the old world will be coming across to them rather than the other way around. That wouldn't surprise me, and it allows them to continue that model of almost half armies building, which is a bit cheeky. So Hawk has pointed out that apparently I have missed a cheer. Always happened. So Bobbit Worms, let's roll back and see if I can find your one. I thought I had been really careful too. How far is back is it, Hawk? Let me actually just go over to Twitch and I'll find it myself. Because it shows up in Twitch far more cleanly than it does over on this side. Let's hope Twitch sound is off. It is. Right, let's go find it. There's Mornington Crescent. I'm not seeing it here either. Okay, I've not got enough of the old chat there. I don't see it over there. Can someone just post the question again so that it's not lost? If you could do that, Hawk, that'd be amazing, and I will just answer it. Because that sucks. I don't want to miss any questions. That would be the worst. Oh, you can repost it. Thanks, Dino Man. Oh, Hawk reposted it too, almost exactly the same time. One creature I think would have a giant version in Warhammer, the Bobbit Worm. It's a worm that lives in burrows on the seafloor and lunges up at fish to cut them in half with its scissor jaws, hence the common name, a reference to Lorena Bobbit. The real-life version grows up to 3 meters long, but I can see a gigantic ship-crushing version. Yeah, going back to Man of War, the large worms in Man of War aren't really worms. I'm going through them all. You got your behemoth, you got your big crabs, you got your dragons. Cool. I agree with you in that I absolutely think that that is something that you would get. I mean, the oceans of the Warhammer world are one of the last repositories of the great megafauna that used to be prevalent across the Warhammer world. And the oceans are filled with gigantic creatures. A lot of them now, in comparison to what they once were, are a little bitty dead. Because they have been hunted down. They've often been used by chaos. In fact, if you go watch our stream, one of our Wednesday streams where we were creating the various brothers to Tamarkan, we sort of go into that with one of them, the Corn one, who goes slaughtering megafauna in the Sea of Chaos up in the north. Good stream. Do recommend watching our Tamarkan ones. They really landed well. But yeah, I think that is a really good idea. Let's draw up this one here as well. We're at it. Dragonite. Hey, Dragonite. Love your shows. Thanks. Got me into Warhammer. Still new. Oh, double thanks. And I'm delighted that you're into it because we love it. And I'm glad that other people are learning to love it too. However, question. In technicality, are Grail Knights effectively demons, half-demons, as they are imbued by the Lady as etheric entity? They aren't like normal blessed priests or wizards. They are written as more than human, to summarize thoughts. So first, are they demons? No. Demons are a very specific type of entity. Let's broaden the category a little and say that etheric entities, things that come from the ether or now exist in the ether, so might have been once mortal and have moved into the ether and have now become etheric entities. Let's just call them etheric entities. So are they etheric entities? The answer is no, because they would be living in the aether. Demons come from the aether. Most spirits come from the aether. Some of them, however, can come through to the material realm in areas of high magic, and many of them have got lots of ways to tie themselves to the material realm, particularly things like dryads and spirits of the like. Oceanids, to move over to Creative Assembly's most recent announcements. So they're not any of those things. They are, however, imbued with the power of a goddess. Now, that goddess is the Lady. Regardless of what the end time says, that goddess is imbuing them with powers. And we don't need anything more than simple magic, if you prefer, because that can do the vast majority of the job, turning them into effectively superhumans. Magic can do that anyway. They manifest in lots of different ways. No two Grail Knights really are the same. They're different virtues that they swear to, the different things that are important to them, the different way that they manifest the Lady's blessings and powers through them. So, loosely speaking, the answer is, to bring up your question here, are they normal blessed priests? No. They have been given something. They are not chanting prayers and bringing about divine effect because of a blessing coming from either the aether, if you believe such things, or they themselves channeling a different form of magic. Are they wizards? Definitely not. They are written as more than human? Definitely. Thoughts, they have been imbued with power by the Lady through the power of the Grail that they all drink from. They have supped from her holy chalice, and there are multiple examples of holy chalices in the Warhammer world. It's worth just noting, for example, Renald is noted for having become a god by supping from a holy chalice. In this case, Shalia's holy chalice. Now, admittedly, it's somewhat of an in-joke, where the idea is that Renald is supping upon her holy chalice, and so taken is Shalia with this that she grants him divinity. It's pretty rubbishly written, but yeah, that's in a few places where the Shalian myth is that Renald was elevated to godhood through that. Not true according to the Shalians, though. If we go to the readings of Pergunda the Wise, who was a child prophet of Shalia down in Heidelberg Mountain, which is just on the southern side of Blackfire Pass, she quite clearly states that Renald was always a god. The Shalian story is a myth that never occurred, ever. There was no tricking of Shalia by Renald for divinity. He always had divinity. He just tricked mortals into thinking that he was once one of them. The whole thing is a great joke and a lie. So there's lots of different ways of doing it. That is worth noting, though, that the cult of Shalia is centered in Couronne, in Bretonnia. And the cult of Shalia has the idea of a chalice directly related to most of their beliefs. They believe Shalia has a chalice, which is also very close to what's happening with the lady, which is just a lovely little interesting aside there. So I'm going to be calling it a day very soon, because this was not the stream we were planning to be doing. So if you've got any last bits, throw them up now, and I'll do a quick few last answers and then head off. And note that, yes, Renald got the silver tongue. Yeah, he certainly did. At least so they say. Blind Lobster. I miss back when the Fey Enchantress made the male stolen children into the Green Knights, rather than the Green Knight being Gilles Breton. Yeah, that was always a rumor. It was never actually confirmed. Really, there's a lovely little side story talking about those handmaidens to the lady. And there was a real idea that all of these men would be coming back during the end times in Ranadandra. They did not, because that was another one of the many things that was missed in the end times. Hannibal, which race do you think is most damned by their fatal flaw? Elves, arrogance; dwarves, stubbornness; humans, corruptibility; Skaven, treachery; orcs, stupidity. It's humans and corruptibility. They are the most damned, and quite literally the most damned. And also the ones that ultimately damn the world. They are the ones that bring it down. Humanity is the problem. The elves are right. Humanity is ultimately going to be responsible for the end of the world, because they are so susceptible to corruption, and their greatest figures, their greatest fighters, their greatest magic users are all on the wrong side, the side of chaos. And that might sound a little bit unfair, but look at the stats of a Chaos Lord who is a human and compare that to any human lord. They don't compare at all. 5 attacks at Web Skill 9, they can fuck off. So, I'll cut a long story short, it's the humans. Elves, arrogance, justified. Dwarfs, stubbornness, justified. Skavens, treachery. Strangely enough, that often brings them as many advantages as disadvantages. But the humans' corruptibility is ultimately at its heart the worst, which is not necessarily popular amongst the humans, but kind of true. Hey Andy, want to ask you for any thoughts on incorporating other emotions than terror in a horror story without losing the core ideas. Thank you, Andy. Hey, still loading. Yeah, dread is the one you're looking for. In fact, I would argue it's far more important than terror. The idea of what's to come is much worse often than the terror of encountering what they are going to ultimately be facing. So manifesting that dread, allowing the story to breathe, allowing everyone to see that something's wrong and get concerned about it, and then hear what might be the problem, and then realize it's worse, and then let their minds go wild with it. Dread is what you're looking for. So that is one I would strongly lean into. Oh, pop them down there. Are the Dragon Princes the Gargoyle Knights just souped up on dragon blood? No. No, they're not. Dragon Princes are just elves with their lovely songs keeping the dragons in place, which is obviously going to annoy some people who don't like Ulthuani dragons being the slaves that they are. But no, the Dragon Princes were, in some regards, in the slot that they took, which is super powerful characters. Yeah, sure, they're kind of Olgar Grail Knights in that regard, because they are really very capable. But they are nothing like the Grail Knights in terms of how they manifest there. So, yeah, kind of no. Nice little one there from Heron. What path was Sage's character on last Friday, assuming Hoeth? The paths, I'm not confirming or denying what she was on, because it's potentially a story point depending on how things are going to spin out later. I don't know what's going to happen in the next steps, so I won't drop actual plot points that could be coming up in a Q&A, but she was on a path. Sage doesn't know what path she was on. Unlike the previous elf card she was playing, where the Path of the Mariner, I gave her the complete rules for it. There's the Path of the Mariner, away you go wild. This one, she was given just a brief for how to act, because I also didn't want her to know what was going on there. So, I think we'll probably call it an end there. Because we're getting at the end. Yeah, just spicy. Because yeah, we've been here for a while. This wasn't the stream we intended to have, but I've had quite a bit of fun. Thank you all for turning up. No, there is one other thing. No, I'm going to do it when I'm on a different stream. So I missed a super chat in my last Ask Andy Anything. Did I get, apparently there's a one there that I missed about yin and yang. Did I? Just before we disappear? Is there, I don't see one here about yin and yang. My comment's not coming through properly. I do not see one about yin and yang at all. Sitting there. So, I can see all the posts. Is it over here? I'm looking now at the Twitch stream. Hawk, Knights, Hawk. No, it's not showing. So where is it? Can somebody post it? Because I'm not seeing it here. Why am I not getting it? This seems fair. Thanks, Hawk, for posting it there. Given that yin and yang are sort of high magic for the 8 wins, what other combination of 4 wins do you think would be most interesting? Also, you missed my post about the Bobbit Worm. We got the Bobbit Worm. Maybe I just caught the Bobbit bit and then didn't catch all the rest. I'm not entirely happy with the way they split the wins with yin and yang anyway. It almost gives this quality that some magic is sort of good and some is sort of bad, some is sort of light and some is sort of shadow. Nah, the wins of magic are all the fucking worst. I honestly think any of the wins could be combined in interesting ways that people might not necessarily expect. That's a bit of a cop-out answer, but any of them can be. And I think that that could be the core for building your own weird new lores as well. When you go, what happens when you take the Goldwyn and combine it with fire? They're natural complements. But what happens when we take gold and we combine it with, say, shadow? What happens when you combine these different winds? And I think entire conversations could be had about all of them. Do I have any I'd like to do? That's a good question. Nice one to end on. Is there one I would like to do? Yes, Celestial and Amethyst. Celestial and Amethyst ties through to a degree with the whole concept of future and past. And it is at the heart of what many perceive to be foresight and witches with foresight. There's lots of real world myths of people whose eyes may change red or blue or some equivalent according where they're looking into the future or the past. Doctor Who runs with this, and whenever you're going in the past, the time tunnel changes one color. When you're going into the future, it changes a different color. That's tied through to old human myth also. And it kind of got picked up to a degree inside the original hag spells that I built for Kislev as well, where their eyes turn different colors according to what they're doing. And I think you build a really interesting wind combo spell group out of that, which would be fun. Now, the red and blue doesn't quite match the purple and blue that you would be using, but it's more than close enough that you could easily come up with almost an identical outcome. So yeah, that's one that I think would be quite fun. I also, just as a small aside, back when we were doing 2nd edition, my job at one point was to come up with the alternates to each one of the winds of magic, as in what happens when you're not taught the proper lore and you just mess about with it. So illusionism, which you're getting in the old world, is the equivalent of grey magic. Demonology is, and this might surprise many, light magic. Your ability to literally tear holes in reality and fuck about with demons. It's the dispelling demon wind, as many people know. And necromancy is, of course, the dark side, or the other way of viewing. amethyst magic. And that's something else I would like to actually finish. I was going to do it as part of the Realms of Sorcery book that was planned for 4th edition. There was going to be basically 8 other lores of magic. Lores of necromancy obviously would be a part of that, the lore of illusionism, and it would have gone all the way back. And it was, for me, an absolute delight to see that the old world had picked up what I was sort of going to do anyway, but they were doing it for slightly different reasons. They were just drawing upon what had come from Warhammer 3rd edition and Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 1st edition, and saying that's what it used to be like before the winds of magic were more thoroughly understood when Teclis came over and went, actually, no, you should be doing it this way. But yeah, that's what I'd like to do. Hopefully that was a nice way of ending. I am going to call it a night. Next week, we will be live Wednesday, where we are doing a What If. And it's going to be quite a fun What If. Oh, Professor Sharp, you came right in at the end there. I'll pick you up in just a second, because we've got one more super chat, and I'm never going to miss a cheer or a super chat. Nice way of keeping me in, Professor Sharp. But I'll finish what I was going to say, which is that we're doing a What If. What if Mandred Ratslayer lost the Great War when the Black Plague was unleashed by the Skaven into the Empire, and the Skaven defeat the Empire? It's going to be an interesting What If. We're doing that on Wednesday. Super looking forward to that, because I love the What Ifs. Next Friday, we won't be doing LAWhammer, because I am going to be at the dentist. I have got an extraction to have, and this is the first step towards another $5,000 bill. Why? I'm obviously looking forward to that. I love dentists, honest. So nothing on the Friday. On Saturday, Inside the Rookery is going to be live at Tabletop Scotland, where we have got awesome group of extremely cool people who are going to be coming along to discuss a topic that I'm going to be putting an advert up, I think, tomorrow. So I won't spoil it yet, but I will say it's going to be a great one. It's going to be coming live from Scotland's biggest tabletop gaming convention. So that's going to be a laugh. I might or might not be there, depending on how the tooth extraction went on the Friday, and whether I've gained an immediate infection because of diabetes. Yay. Then, of course, next Sunday, we'll be discussing Morathi on Lorebeards at 4 p.m. UK time on the Sunday. So, cheeky Professor Shap. Thanks for today, Andy. Oh, that was a nice way to end. I hadn't read your comment. Thank you very much. Had much fun and been very enlightening. Was cool learning about Morathi dwarf rune thing. Yeah, isn't it? Isn't it just? It's a really cool little detail. I love all those cool little details that have been hidden away in different books in Warhammer. And when you read them, you go, wait, what? Wow. So yeah, it's a good one. I'm gonna call it a day there. Thanks very much, y'all. I had to do a y'all because we've got no texting on the call, and you have to end with at least one y'all. I will see you all next time, when hopefully you'll join us on the Wednesday as we do our gigantic What If. So until then, until next time, bye bye.